You're welcome, seriously. I'm going to tell you all about the book. All right, if y'all could come back in here. Do they have a speaker in that room? I hollered at them. You hollered at them? All right. Okay. All right, if I can have your attention, we're going to have a drawing from the book. There's some conditions of getting the free book. You have to give me a $100 bill. No, that's not true. Okay. Let me tell you about the book. It is for sale. Deal on the book, except for the two that get a free one. And if you're nice, maybe a third one. It's $20 for the book. It helps Spark of Life. There is a... did you want to say something about the book now, since I paid him big money to say whatever he's going to say.
So I actually have a signed copy of the book. It's my heirloom for Bennett when he gets older. But it's a really good book. One thing I really appreciate about it is you hear how he talks. It's very laid back. There's a lot of jokes, but it gives you the information you need. That's exactly how the book's written. So it's really easy to follow. You learn a bunch of stuff. And one thing I really appreciate also about it is it asks questions that I feel like a lot of people are scared to ask, even though they have it. I know I've had many of the questions in the book. And it gets your brain going and thinking about these different things. The title of the book is Why Do You Hurt Me, God? Most of us, when we're mad at God, I've been mad at God. Do I have a right to be mad at God? And you're questioning those things. Do I have this right? What's going on with me? And you're working through those things. It's really cool. So I highly recommend it. Whether you win one or not, it's worth the $20 for sure.
And the deal, thank you for that, Zach. The check will be in the mail. All right. The deal with the book is this. You could put $20 or write a check to me, because I had to pay for the books. Write the check to me. Or you can Cash App or Venmo or Smoozmo, whatever those things are. I have no idea what they are. Debbie knows all of that. And just put the money in the thing. If you don't have 20 and you want a book and you only have 15, put 15. If you want a book and you only have 10, put 10. If you want a book, only have 5, put 5. If you have no money and you want the book, just take a book. That's the deal with the book. Okay. Now, if you want to do what one guy did and gave us $10,000 for a book, that's not true. He didn't do that, but I thought it'd make a neat story. We have had people put more in the book to help offset those who can't afford a book. Do what you want to do. The book's not perfect, but why do you hurt me, God, is a question we get all the time. I prayed for protection of my kid. He gets in a wreck and he dies. Another parent has a kid, this happens all the time, goes off the freeway, tumbles 10 times, and the parent says, God protected my kid. And the other parent God didn't protect their kids the way they wanted him to. That makes sense? I had cancer. We prayed. God healed the cancer. Our nephew, Jeff, who were like a son to me, and Debbie lived 30 minutes from us in Nashville. He came over to the house. Got started late in life with kids. 8-year-old, 10-year-old has glioblastoma, stage 4 brain cancer. We prayed 1,000,000 prayers for him. Right? He died anyway. We deal with people who die anyway. And I believe in prayer. And if I have cancer, would you please pray for me? Right? I believe in prayer. But we'll talk about that in the sermon tomorrow. But that's enough. All right, let's get I tell you, since you're up here, why don't you, did you put gum on your card so I could, okay, all right.
But if I pull my card, do I have to put it back?
No. We had one case where, I picked a Kelly to draw. She drew her name. Okay, the next draw, her mother was there. And the mother drew her name. And then we drew another card, and their brother won. And we had probably 80 people at that workshop. So it's kind of crazy. All right. Here, take that one. No. Ace of Spades. Oh.
Ross Lucas.
Ross. You get a book. I'm glad you won the book, man. I've been talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Ross cannot win 2 books. So that's a book thing. All right. Let's go on with Fight Grief. Is this being videoed? Yes. Do I need to stand somewhere? I didn't ask.
No, you guys are good kind of in between the stairs. So yeah, right there is perfect.
Right here. I should have put a star here. Like I say, I had a star spot. All right. Session 2. This is fighting grief. We got to have an attitude of, I'm not going to let grief defeat me. That does not mean do not accept grief and seasons of grief. I want that to be clear as we talk about fighting grief. I've done some videos on this about fighting grief, the debilitating effects of grief. You know how people respond to videos on YouTube. You know, you're going to have the negative people, you're going to have the positive people. And sometimes says, I can't believe you'd say you can get over grief. I never say that, right? So I want to be clear about what we mean by that. And so this myth busting, we've got to destroy myths of grief. What I'm about to say about, and you can see it in your notes, but what we're about to say about the greatest myth of grief that's out there, almost everybody in this room have accepted the 5 stages of grief. The 5 stages of grief is a myth, and I know that grates against some therapists, some people who do grief work. We don't want to come across saying that those people are all bad. No. But we believe it's important to talk about the truth. And the truth of this is that this myth can hurt people in their recovery. Really good people teach this who are a lot smarter than Dave Matthews. So we're not putting them down. I used to believe in the 5 stages, not very long, because I read the book back in 1970 or 71. And so when you look in your notes there, you'll see the notes. Don't I have the cover of the book in the notes? Yeah. On Grief and Dying was written by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross in 1969. I went to my first graduate work in theology in 1973. And in one of my courses, or I can't remember, it's been so long, I had to read this book. It was a kind of an not earth-shattering, but a groundbreaking book. And if you'll read the subtitle of the book, can somebody read the subtitle of the book, The 5 Stages of Grief? What's the subtitle?
What the dying have to teach doctors, nurses, clergy, and their own families.
Who? The dying. So Kubler-Ross, and the reason this became a myth in grief recovery is because it's so associated with grief. And really, what she was talking about was what are typical responses of people who are given the death sentence by the doctor. In other words, you have, I'll just take my nephew Jeffrey. Jeff got the news after he had, all these symptoms. They tried to find out why is he having seizures. And they finally, after many weeks of testing, said, we're sorry to inform you, but you've got stage 4. Is it glioblastoma? Does that sound right? And some of you might have been affected with a loved one. And it's very, it's like, some can survive a few years, but usually it's pretty quick, like 18 months, something like that. And that's exactly what happened to him. So it would be Jeff-type people who have this disease and they know they're facing death. And she interviewed these people. And she wanted to know what the dying have to teach us about what they're going through so that we can better minister to the dying and all that. And so she found out that there were 5 typical responses most people have to those who have the death sentence. Now you can see where this is a grief issue, but she did not specifically study what do you go through who lost somebody to death, who've undergone loss or lose something else, like you could be fired from a job. And so this began to be applied to those who have experienced loss of somebody, not their own health. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, why do we make a big deal about it? Because it hurts people in recovery. So her 5 stages were denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. I think the 5 stages are put there on your notes. And again, we don't teach this. I've done a video on it, and the video doesn't get very good response for some reason, because almost everybody teaches this and believes it. So we're going through this material. We had put this material together. We had gone through some intense grief workshops and conferences that cost a lot of money. And we'd gone through like 4 days, 32 hours of grief intensives. And I was reading everything I could read when we started Spark of Life. And when I found out that this was a myth, I said, oh my goodness, I've taught this to people in the past. Not very much, but I did a little bit until we started studying this whole thing. And so we put this material together, and we had, I was working for the church there in Searcy, and we have this big old den in our house. And so we decided to do a 12-week study on grief using the material you got in your hands, and probably 80% of it's still the same, and we've added some, taken some away. But it's 12 weeks. We could have announced it in our church. We did not. I never told anybody from the pulpit, for example, about it. We never put it in our bulletin, in our online stuff, because Debbie and I wanted 12 people to come. We capped it at 12 to keep a small group, and 23 people showed up. Okay. And I told about 2 people about it. I think we could have done this class 20 times over the next 5 years and been full. So we had 23 people, and we came across the week in which, and every week we divided up in groups of 3 or 4 men groups, 3 or 4 women groups, all around our house, okay? And on about the 5th week, we talked about the myths, and we focused on the 5 stages of grief being a myth. And a guy named Terry had lost his wife, Letha, to cancer. I think she had been gone maybe 6 months. And Terry was a good friend of mine, still is. And I said, Terry, would you be interested in a grief class at our house? And he said, yes, where do I sign up? So he signed up, and I think they were in their 60s, maybe late 50s when Letha died, real suddenly from cancer, 6 weeks from diagnosis to death. So Terry's to my right, and we've got 4 guys in a group, and we're going over this. And as we went over the material, he says, well, I can now see that this is a myth. And I believed this, and I have believed it. I've taught it to people in my life. He was a minister for many years, and he had done a lot of grief pastoral counseling. And I said, well, do you see why it's a myth? He said, yes, I see it. I'm so relieved. Why are you relieved? He said, well, I've never been angry. I've never denied her death. I don't have any denial about her death, and I've never been angry. And I thought, well, I'm stuck in my grief. I can't get through grief till I go through these 5 stages. And he said, and then I thought maybe I didn't love Letha enough. If I loved her, why haven't I been through these stages? Because grief's associated with love. And he said, it's like this boulder has gotten off my back, and I can get on living life, and I don't have to go through these stages. Now, if we could bring Elizabeth Kubler-Ross back from the dead, she would say she never intended for this to be 5 neat steps, and you complete one, go to the other, then the other, then the other, and finally you're done with it. That's the problem with 5 steps. It's not easy, 5 steps. And the 5 keywords I gave Kelly there and you all, we're not talking about 5 steps. We're not talking about, I give myself permission to grieve. Okay, grieve. Okay, next, I give myself permission to recover. We're not talking about that. If we were talking about that, would you even be here? You'd probably leave. And I would not blame you for leaving, because it's not that simple. It is not, and the people who teach this don't believe it's simple either, by the way. So I wanted you to know about this myth so you don't buy into it. Now, we can learn from it, especially if you have somebody that's dying in your family. They might deny that they're dying. I have never seen anybody that's come to one of our retreats that had a death loss that denied the death of their loved one. We have had people who never found the body, and there are some people, wouldn't that make sense that you might not think they have died? Yes, that can happen. And sometimes people do deny the death, and they do need help because the death is obvious, and they went to the funeral, saw the body, and all that. And Elvis is not still alive. Y'all got it? I mean, Elvis really is not. And so there are some people who are in denial of that. But 99% of people who are grieving a death loss are not in denial. Now, some people are in denial of non-death losses, like an abusive situation as a child, a sexual abuse situation. They can deny it, but what they've done is stuffed it. They've stuffed it so deep because it's so painful that if they took a lie detector test, they might pass it. If they've ever been abused and they say no, they could pass that test. There are some people that have repressed or suppressed, I get those 2 words mixed up, but it's so deep. But it's still in the pre-conscious or the unconscious. It's still in there. And then it can come out. But anger, everybody doesn't get angry with their God. Zach said he's been angry with God. I've been angry with God. I'm no longer angry with God. That doesn't mean I'm better than anybody who is angry. Does everybody get the myth of this? All right, so we have this couple this woman come to a retreat many years ago. She was a minister of outreach at their church in Houston. And so she called me after the retreat and said, hey, would you come and do a grief workshop for us? So we got a date. I go down to Houston. I thought I was the only one on the agenda like today. Somehow the communication was mixed up. We got there and they had a nice breakfast, kind of like y'all did today. Beautiful, thank you ladies, or whoever did that. Thank you so much. It's wonderful. It was wonderful. So I sat down at one of the tables there before we started, and I got the program, and the program had 2 other people on the agenda speaking. I thought I had 4 hours. I ended up having 1 hour. Can you imagine how fast I talked? Okay, so I had 1 hour. So they had an hour, and they were 2 grief specialists, grief therapists in Houston. They were probably in their 60s at that time, and they had a practice together in grief counseling for 30 years. They were kind of the gurus of the Houston area for a while, at least in that part of Houston. And they were speaking before me. They were very nice. They were lovely. They had so much to offer. I enjoyed talking with them, but they were on the agenda before me. Part of my stuff was to debunk the myth of the 5 stages of grief. I just knew they were talk about the 5 stages as being fact, and I felt like I was in a dilemma. I don't want to embarrass them. they knew more about grief recovery than I did. I did not want to be that person. I did not want to be the person who would let a lie, a myth, and maybe hurt some people. So I took the option I thought best. I prayed that God would somehow make one of them sick, and they would have to go home before. I say, God, you do whatever you want, but I'd sure appreciate a little something. And of course, I was kind of halfway kidding, almost kidding. But I really felt a dilemma. I didn't know what I was going to do. So they spoke for about an hour. I took notes, some of which is in your book, comes from their thoughts. I think we can learn from people, right? And they were wonderful. I loved them. And they had about 10 minutes to go. And I thought I was home free. They had not mentioned the 5 stages. And finally, one of them said, okay, before we close, let's talk briefly about the 5 stages of grief. I said to myself, really, God, really? I mean, you set this up for me to be hopeful, and then, right? And by the way, I don't believe God controls every decision we make, but we'll talk about that tomorrow, and that's in the book. So he goes, we used to teach this until a year ago, and then we have discovered that this is a myth. And they go through the whole thing, just like I went through with you. So I had to apologize to God, and all that stuff. So I get up and I tell the story how I started saying, first I want to say thank you to you two beautiful women who have just really enlightened us today. And I have to repent that I did pray for God to make one of you sick. Then I explained. So they are very gracious. They thought it was funny. But this is slowly making its way into the grief world, slowly, about the myth of the 5 stages. Does that help you any? I hope you see what we're talking about here. And we owe a lot to Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and the groundbreaking work she did. Now we're going to go into the God myths. This is where the book is about a lot of, not all of this, the book, but it is about this. God myths can actually make us hate God and grief. The biggest God myth that we know. So at our retreats, we have a page with all these myths. We have the people at the retreat, and there's usually 8 to 16 people at a given retreat, small group. Look over the list. We give them a minute to look over the list. Circle the ones that you've either heard or bought into. And which myth stands out the most to you? By far, the number one answer is this one. God will not give you more than you can handle. The reason is those words appear to be true. They are true. If God gives us something, we can handle it. Okay? So the words are true is why, in every myth, there's a lot of truth. In every myth. Or they would not become myths. If I told you I'm late coming here because 3 Martians kidnapped me and took me to Mars and I spent 10,000 years there and then I came back, that would not gain traction. Well, it would. You would write me up and say, don't use David in a workshop. No, every myth has a lot of truth into it. This myth is so damaging because it implies whatever you're receiving that's bad, God gave it to you. Did God give you everything that you're going through? Yes or no?
He allows it, but he didn't give it to us.
Yeah, and we talk about that in the book. God allows it as if he could change it, as if he could twitch his nose or do this for you old timers. Who's this? Genie, right? And who's the nose? Bewitched. See, all you young people, you've missed out on 2 of the greatest shows in history, right? So we had a child that was hurt by somebody else in an abusive situation. Somebody comes up to me at church, a friend, and said, David, I'm so sorry. We had opened up to a couple of people when we first found out. David, I'm so sorry. God won't give you more than you can handle. Why didn't I like that? What's wrong with that?
But you think that God gave it to you on purpose.
So God wants a little child abused, yes or no? Come on, answer that. No. God doesn't want evil ever. God died to overcome sin. So somebody, now if this applies to your life and this happened to you, I'm not trying to be a trigger. I can't help but I know some things I say might trigger you. But let's say a child grows up and he's 17 and he drinks a lot and he drives like an idiot and he doesn't wear a seatbelt and he crashes into a car and he's killed and he kills somebody else. So God gave that to the parent? Yes or no? No. Free will gave that to him. Satan is real, and you had Joe Beam come here last year. I don't know if he did anything with spiritual warfare. He talked about marriage. Jesus believed in Satan, yes or no? Yes. There are spiritual forces of evil that we cannot see. If we saw everything that was real, it would scare us, wouldn't it? But if we saw everything that was real with our physical eyes, we would also see angels that are good angels. And we'd see Gabriel, and we would see, who's the other one? Michael. They're the warrior angels. We would see them. So we might be comforted, but it would probably scare us. God, according to C.S. Lewis, must think highly of free will, because free will has caused all the mess of this world. And when Adam and Eve were tempted, and God made the rule, don't you eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, because when they did, God knew the floodgates would be open. So why did God put the tree in the middle of the garden? When our kid was 2 or 3 and he grabbed everything on the coffee table and threw it against the wall or broke it, instead of me trying to get him not to do that, what did we finally do? We removed the breakable things. So why did he put that tree in there? Well, it's pretty simple. And it's this part of the book. God is love, and love must do one thing. What must love do? Choose. And love must love. So God, why did you create the world?
You wanted people to choose him, to love him like he loves us.
It's not, now, conservative theologians will go crazy and just bury me with criticism saying this, but God needed us. Why would I say God needed us?
He wants a relationship with us. He created us for a relationship.
It's love. It is. Why do you have children knowing that the children are going to have pain? Why do you have children? Why did you have children? Love. You were created like God. I was created like God. That means I'm in His image. You're in His image. And God is a creator. And God is love. It is as natural for us to want to have children, even in the midst of a bad world. And so God, don't shortchange yourself in understanding God. I can't understand total God. He's holy, holy, holy. I'm sinful, sinful, sinful. I get that. But the gap between us and God is not like this. It's more like this. There's a big gap. But God became human. God did not become a dog. The ability of God to become human is phenomenal for humans. So the high stakes of being God, yes. The high stakes of being human, yes. We were created to be like Him, love like Him, forgive like Him, and suffer like Him. So God is love, love must love, and love demands free choice, not a fake free choice. Yes or no? So I don't know how many abuses are taking place, both physical, sexual, and emotional abuse right now with little kids all over this world. I would guess in the millions, right as we speak. Why didn't He stop it? Free will. So if He stops person A from hurting little child B, there is no free will. If He stops it every time, there is nothing called love in this world. God's love is made complete in us, which is a phenomenal statement John makes. I don't know what it means. Again, some theologians would say, you're saying God needs something perfect, doesn't need. Who says God doesn't need love if God is love? Does God need love? The answer is yes. You shall have no other gods before me, not because he's self-centered, but because he knows he's the giver of life. There is no life outside of God that lasts. Now, that's theology 909, like in 10 minutes, but God had to create in a sense. Now, if you disagree with that, it's okay. You'll see that that's right later. No. You'll see that you're wrong. No. It's so complicated, but it's not. So we try to simplify it. So God didn't give us everything that's evil. He gave us nothing that's evil. He gave us free choice. God is not responsible for my free choice. He is responsible for me having free choice, but the responsibility goes back to love. So, who feels most responsible for cleaning up the mess of the world? Who's the person who feels the most responsibility? God. It's on him. And you can criticize me, but it's all God's fault. But the fault doesn't mean in something he did wrong. The fault is his purity of love. It's his fault we have free will. It's not his fault that we disobey him. It's Satan's fault. So God will not give you more than you can handle. If he gives it, you can handle it. But he doesn't give you. There's another myth that God took your loved one. Look at that other myth. This goes in line with what we're saying. Can God take you out? Yes. Has God taken people out? Yes. God has every right to do what he wants to do, but God cannot do everything. You say, yes, he can't. No, he can't. He cannot what? Lie. He cannot not love. Can he get angry? Yes. Can God change his mind? He sure did in the Bible. Can God be persuaded? Yes. Don't ask me to defend all that. But he can be. In Isaiah 54, and I forget the reference. In Isaiah 54, God says that if somebody attacks you, it will not be my doing. He says that. Don't you dare blame me if somebody attacks you. And he goes on to say, but the ones that attack you are using weapons that the guy who makes the weapons, the blacksmith. God has made the blacksmith who made the weapons that evil people took the weapons and hurt other innocent people. And God says, don't you blame me. It is not my doing. Jesus wept over Jerusalem. And we just read this, my wife and I, in our daily Bible reading together, that Jesus could not do many miracles in his hometown. Why? Yeah. And he could, because of their lack of faith, and a prophet is not without honor in his hometown, and he was restricted by people's lack of faith. So, God can take my loved one. I was mad at God because my dad didn't die for about 5 years. I prayed that God would take Dad before Mom changed his diapers. It didn't happen. And I wanted God to take him. So God can take us out. He's taken other people out. God can extend your life. He extended Hezekiah's life 15 years. Y'all remember that? So you pray. We're not saying God doesn't intervene. We're saying, but every death is not because God took them. Now we're not going to get into, does God know every single thing you're going to choose to do tomorrow? In Jeremiah 3, I will just say this. In Jeremiah 3, God says, not Jeremiah, God, I had hoped my people would repent and turn back to me, but they did not. So was God disappointed? So evidently God didn't know they were going to turn back. Didn't know they weren't going to turn back. There's about 50 passages like that in the Bible. God did know Judas was going to betray him, that Peter was going to deny him. God did know that the Christ was going to come. God does prophesy. God does know the future. And almost every time God knows the future because he intervenes to make sure it is. And it's all connected to Jesus coming at the right time and dying on that cross. So God can know the future, but there is evidence in the Bible that it's not as simple as we think. It's not God saying, oh, this person's going to do evil. Should we intervene? I don't know if it's that simple. I don't know if we can ever understand it totally. But we can understand some things, right? Does this make sense? All I'm saying is we don't have answers to everything like this. But we do have the answer. And the bedrock is God loves us and God would do anything to save us. That we know because the cross is solid, right? And the resurrection is real. But God might have taken your loved one, he might not have. God needed another angel, true or false? He created all the angels he needs. If he needs more angels, I think he can create them. What do you think? Popular beliefs about angels is a third of the angels were swept away out of heaven by the dragon's tail. You remember that in Revelation? So that makes sense to me. I don't know if it's true. It seems to be that 2/3 of the angels were good and 1/3. That gives God a 2-to-1 advantage over the world. God must want to teach you something. He might. Josiah, in my conviction, did not die so we could learn about grief, so we could do Spark of Life. We do Spark of Life as a result of not only that loss, but other losses we've experienced. So can you learn something from Yes, you can learn something. But don't make an assumption that every single thing that happens, it happens for a reason. That's the next one. Everything happens for a reason, which means everything happens because God wanted it to happen. God does not want a child abused. He does not want torture of a child. What does Jesus say if it happens?
Woe to them that interfere with it.
I wouldn't want to be in their shoes, is what he said. It'd be worse than they drown with a millstone around their neck in the depths of the ocean. That's pretty strong language. God doesn't want that. So don't say, now some things can happen because God for a reason. Yes or no? Yes, don't say I'm saying God doesn't intervene and no, but I can learn from anything that does happen. So I do not have to let my past destroy me, defeat me, my losses destroy me, defeat me. I can grieve, I can mourn, and then I can get up, wash my face, and start on this path upward with my pain and saying, I'm not going to let this defeat me. I'm going to fight grief and the debilitating effects of grief and learn from what happened. So we do Spark of Life, not because God wanted us to learn a lesson. Well, he wants us to learn a lesson, but that doesn't mean it happened for that reason. But it could. Everybody got it? Okay. Other common myths, I think they're in your book. We don't have time to go over those. Okay. There's common intellectual truths. We've mentioned this before. One of the common intellectual truths is at least they're in a better place. I believe my mom and dad are in a better place, but we've had women who've lost babies and men who've lost children. The better place for that baby is where? In the mama's arms, in the daddy's arms. That's what God created us for giving life and for us to take care of those babies, right? Now, intellectually, I might believe that heaven's a better place. In fact, I do. Paul said, I desire to be with Christ, which is better by far than staying on this earth. So, intellectually, I know my loved ones are in a better place, but that might not help me for a while. It helps me in the long run. And it might help me in the short run too, right? It might help me. It does help. This cognitive triangle, we don't spend much time with it, especially when I go on and on like I have. But my thoughts contribute to my emotions, my feelings contribute to how I behave. My behavior can shape my thoughts can shape my behavior can shape my emotions can shape my thoughts. But what's on the top of the cognitive triangle? My thoughts, right? I can change my thinking. How many of you have changed your view of God over the years? If you don't raise your hand, it's either you don't like raising your hand or you bought into that you have all perfect knowledge of God. So I know there's nobody here that can live and say, I've got all the answers, right? So I hope you're growing in your knowledge of God, and that's part of the purpose of what we're doing here, to equip you with good, sound, practical information that can help you be encouraged that you don't have to stay in the depths of the pit to prove your love for somebody. You don't have to stay there, okay? So I can actually feel hopeless and helpless because I think I can never be happy again. So I feel these emotions. So it affects my thoughts. My thoughts affect my behavior. So I do not have the right to live forward and be happy again because it would dishonor my child or my husband or my wife. Has anybody ever had that thought? So those are thoughts that we can change. Does it dishonor my loved ones who have died for me to be happy? Yes or no? No. From an objective viewpoint, we say no. When I'm in the throes of grief, I might say, well, how can I be happy? If I'm happy, it says I didn't need them. That's false thinking. It's normal thinking for a while. Don't beat yourself up for having it. We just don't want you to stay there. So you can change those thoughts. So part of our purpose today is to chip away at myths and intellectual truths, so-called, that hinder my recovery. If we change the thoughts, just start changing the thoughts. By the way, God's not a monster, so God's not responsible for evil things people do, right? And has God taken care of the problem? Yes or no? He has taken care of it by doing all He can do. He has sent His Son, and He's created that story and sent His Son, so He has done all He can do and will continue to do all He can do, and we can know that because of the cross and the resurrection. So, God's not a monster. And the reason I got angry with God, because there wasn't a week that, it wasn't just Josiah's death. It was people in my office week after week after week sharing horrific stories about abuse and then doing Spark of Life and all this stuff that we hear all the time. And I could tell you 100 illustrations. So my thought process was, good grief, God, I don't understand why there's so much evil in the world. And but Jesus still wept, didn't He, at the grave? He does care. So I started changing my thoughts, and it sure helped my emotions be from hopeless to helpless. All right, any questions about what we've talked about? Any questions? Could be pretty heavy. Our losses are filtered through our brain box. My mother was the president of the CMP Club. Was yours? Anybody know what the CMP Club is? I'll give one word and let's see who gets it. Clean My Plate Club. Whose mother was president? Whose mother was on the board of directors? I grew up in the 50s and then 60s. And my mother did say this, there are starving children in China. The Chinese parents said there's starving children in America. Okay, so clean your plate. That's a myth. Sorry, it doesn't feed anybody else for you to not clean your plate. I mean, it doesn't make other people go hungry because you didn't eat all your asparagus and broccoli. Peas, I hated peas. Of course, now if you put a ton of bacon grease in them and put whipped cream and ice cream on them, I can eat some peas. But it just doesn't matter about that and feeding the hungry, right? So replace the loss. Big boys don't cry. Time heals all wounds. Yes or no? No. Time does not heal all wounds. It can lower the intensity. It's what you do with the time that can get you on a path of a healthy recovery. Small choices you make. So this forms our belief system. Okay. Buying into misinformation, intellectual truths can lead to confusion about God. That's why half the people that come to our retreats that have a Christian background stop going to church. because God's a monster. Buying into some of these myths. And the big myth is if you had greater faith, you wouldn't feel so bad. That's a big myth. So I got to start replacing that. It's okay for you to be confused and angry. So it can lead, if I buy into the myths, to confusion about God, rejection of God, frustration, failure, and isolation. Any questions? Are y'all still awake? Yes. Okay. Get you awake. I'll tell you one quick story. One of my favorite stories. A woman came. She was a neuroscientist. She worked at a big university. She had a PhD degree. She was working on postdoctorate work. She was doing research. With no offense to you guys or anybody else, she's probably the smartest person I've ever been around in my life. No offense, but smart. She was from France. When she was little, her mother came in and said, "You pick," to her, "between staying with your dad or coming with me. I'm leaving your father. We're going to get a divorce." She had one younger sister, and this woman, Marie, I'll call her Marie, got to choose, and I think she was 10 years old, something like that. And she loved her mom and she loved her dad, so she picked her dad, and her mother took her sister and left. So she grew up with just her dad, and didn't see her mother for quite a long time until later, much later. Well, as she grew up, she wanted to get some work in neuroscience, and they found out that West Coast University was the best place to go in the United States. So she left her father and came to the West Coast from France. Then the father got cancer. The only person on earth, and then her boyfriend. The only two people that really loved her, and she didn't know much about her boyfriend. I mean, for a while, right, getting to know him. But the father, only person on earth that loved her. And then I don't know if their relationship was good, bad, or ugly, but it was all she had. And they couldn't treat him in France, so they're going to bring him to the United States, but the insurance didn't cover the treatment that might have saved him. And so she was an atheist. And she came to the retreat, and we have a optional communion time on Sunday morning and prayer time. People don't have to come to that. About 95% of the people come to that. We've had atheists come to it, agnostics, we've had Jewish people come to it, but it's optional. We don't make a big deal if people don't come. So on Saturday at the retreat, we had told everybody about it. We were eating on Saturday night. This was in Colorado, where we were having our next retreat in early May. Beautiful. It was a beautiful spring day. We were grilling lamb chops outside, and we were sitting at this table outside, everybody, and Marie was right across the table from me, and everybody was getting up and walking around. It was just me and her left. People were milling around. She goes, "David, I want you to know I won't be coming to the communion service and prayer thing tomorrow morning." I said, "That's all right, Maria, it's okay." She says, "Well, I'm an atheist." And I said, "No, I didn't know that." I said, "I know you're from France, and I know you're in the neuroscience department at a big-time university like Southern Cal, UCLA. I figured you were." But that's kind of judging you, so I had no way to know that. She said, "Well, I am an atheist." And I said, "Well, that's cool." And I said, "So I'm surprised you, did you know this was did you know we were Christians?" She said, "Oh, I knew you were a Christian." I said, "How did you know that?" She said, "Well, I got your book." I said, at that time, the book, it was the first edition, had just been released. I didn't know how she got the book. I'm so kind of ignorant. She said, "Well, I got it on Amazon." It's on Amazon? I didn't know that. I guess my editor put it on there. That's how ignorant I am about such things. This was many years ago. And she said, "So you wrote this book about God, and kind of like what Zach said, he said, you asked the questions I've always asked about God. I've never had an answer for it." So I'm a researcher, so I've researched everything I could on you before I came to this retreat. So She told me the story I just told you, and so a group of Christians where she worked, a Christian where she worked, when her dad was coming over here and they needed to raise money, she said this group of Christians have been known to help people in situations like this. That's what they exist for, so you can go to them and maybe they can help you. So she did. She found them. She went to them. Here's what they told her, according to her. They interviewed her. She was living with her boyfriend, not married. Where do you go to church? We don't go to church. I'm an atheist. They told her, this is why your father's dying of cancer and what happened to you, because God's trying to teach you something. So they didn't help her. That's her only experience with Christians until she came to this retreat. Eric was a Christian. Her boyfriend was Christian. She had a napkin. She's a very, very clean person. Can I say that? I mean, she, very, very clean. There was barbecue sauce on the lamb chops. She had a napkin that was just filthy. It was just dirty, and it was there. I said, "Is that your napkin?" She said, "Oh, yes, I'm embarrassed." I said, "Well, don't be embarrassed. It's just a dirty napkin." And I said, and there's a clean napkin over here. I said, "That's your view of God." She said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Your view of God is like he's a monster. That he just is out to punish people and make their life miserable to pay them back." And I said, she said, "That's not your God?" I said, "No, my God's this clean napkin. I have some spots on the napkin because I don't understand God perfectly. But I want to," he said, "Well," she said, "Who is your God?" I said, "Well, here's what I think God would do with you right now. I think God would hug you. Because God is love." So I asked her, I said, "What do you think the purpose of life is?" And she said, "I think the purpose of life is to love." I said, "We agree. Maybe we're not that far apart. She needs to see a God of love." Do you agree with that? Yes. Buying into the myths and intellectual truths can lead to confusion about God, rejection of God, frustration, failure, and isolation. This is our friend Marie. She's coming to be a believer. Three big beliefs to challenge. So we're trying to change our brain box. We're trying to understand that making our kids, if our kids don't want to eat the bad food like green peas or let's say cauliflower without the cheese sauce. Y'all got that? Without all the good stuff. I've got to change my brain box. This is the worst thing that could ever happen to me. Why is that destructive? Yeah, wonder if something else happens. You might not ever get out of that pit. If I believe this is the worst thing that could ever happen, and by the way, everybody in this room at this moment has a worst thing. What is your worst loss? You don't have to tell me now. You don't have to tell me. You all have the worst loss. We have two worst losses, Debbie and me. And one has to do with what we've already talked about. My worst loss might be different than Debbie's. But we all have a loss we consider the very worst loss we've ever had. So this is the worst thing that could ever happen. We need to change that to this is the worst thing that has happened till this moment. That's an accurate statement. You've all got one. I hope to God that nothing worse happens to you than what you've been through. But I can't guarantee it. So that's a little switch, a little reframing. The next one, my loss is now my identity. So Dennis and Terry lost a daughter to murder. Small town, 20,000 people in central Arkansas. It happened in Memphis where they lived. It was a big deal on the news. It hit the newspapers, all the news stations. It hit it in Little Rock, Memphis, and of course Searcy, the Searcy whatever newspaper they had. Everywhere they went, people, after this became known, people looked at them and said, they're the ones who lost the daughter whose husband killed, their son-in-law killed their daughter. It was so widespread. It became their identity. Y'all see how that can happen? We had another woman that came to a workshop. Her father had been he was a prominent man, a banker. He had white-collar crime. He was put into prison. And in the Church of Christ community, it was out of West Texas, this was probably 20 years ago, it was well known. She said at this workshop, she said she took a week off from school. She was a student at a Christian university, and she took a week off from school, and she came back, and guess what everybody's talking about? Her dad was in prison. He was a criminal, and it became her identity. And she said, I couldn't escape it. Glenn came to a retreat. Glenn was in his 60s. His 42-year-old son had taken his life by suicide. I didn't know Glenn. He was from Searcy. And he came to a retreat with his wife. And he told us that when he came to the retreat on Saturday, we talked about my loss. If it becomes your identity, you're going to stay stuck for the rest of your life. Your loss will shape you, change you, influence you, remake you. Yes or no? Yes. Some losses more than others. So we're not saying it doesn't change you. We're not saying it doesn't shape you. We're not saying it doesn't influence you greatly. It does and it can. But if it becomes your core identity, you're going to struggle. So a woman comes to the well. She's been married how many times? 5 times. She's living with a guy, not her husband. She had given up on marriage. Tell me her thoughts about herself. That's all you need. You know the story. Tell me her thoughts as she goes to the well to draw water alone.
She's not good enough.
She's not good enough.
She'll never change.
She'll never change. She's a failure. She's worthless. She's hopeless. Nobody has anything to do with her. She has the mark of the beast on her head, as it were. The scarlet, whatever it is. God couldn't love her. So her identity was tied up in all her losses, her failures, everything about her life. That's who she was. I've asked people, how long did Jesus talk to her at the well? I do not know. The disciples had gone to the nearby village to get some food. When they come back, they see Jesus talking with a woman alone. Amazing. The disciples sometimes had bits of wisdom. This time they finally thought correctly. Let's not ask him any questions, because you know what he's doing is right, and we don't get it. You know what's going on. And if you don't believe that's the way it happened, watch The Chosen, because that's exactly probably what happened. That's why The Chosen is so good, because they're so real. And Jesus is like a human being. So he became fully human. So they talk. Let's say it's an hour. Let's say it's 2 hours. I have no idea. And then she leaves the conversation, and she leaves what behind? Significant?
The water jug, yeah, that's the thing.
She went thirsty, and she left full of living water. How could you make up that story? It's so powerful. And was she different when she left him? What did she do?
Told everybody.
She became a preacher, and we wouldn't let her preach in our churches, and I'm not even going there. She became an evangelist. What happened? Her identity changed like that. From loser to a woman loved by God. She had met the Messiah. Same thing with a woman caught in adultery in John 8, 2 of my favorite stories, because it never gets tired of telling that story. She changed her identity when she found, look, if my hope is in this world, it's not eternal hope. It's a false front. Yes or no? Any physical hope is temporary. So the battle between the spirit and the flesh is always with us. And so this is the conflict of life, isn't it? And we hold on to the physical because it's all we know right now. But we know it's not all there is. This woman found her true identity. That's your true identity too. If your past mistakes, failures, losses, what I call it spit, the spit of life, your spit, other spit, life spit, right? It's all messy, smelly. If we're not careful, that forms who we are in our own eyes. I can change that brain box, my loss, my tragedies, my failures do not mean that's my identity. So Glenn comes to the the retreat. 42-year-old son dies of suicide. Here's what he said. We got to this point in the retreat. He said this. Stop doing that, David. He said, he raised his hand. He hadn't spoken all retreat. He raised his hand and he goes, I think I know why I'm here. Okay, why are you here? He said, I came to this retreat as a failed father. I thought my brain box said, if I was a better father, my son wouldn't have done this. If I was only a better father. So my identity was, I was a failed, flawed failure, dad who let his son down. If I would have been, if only I'd have been better, he wouldn't have done this. If you have ever known somebody who ended their life by suicide, the closer you are to them, the more likely it is that you feel guilt. It just goes with the territory. I hope you don't feel guilt, but if you feel guilt, change it to regret. Because most of us could go to a court of law and we would be pronounced not guilty of the things we think we're guilty of. Have I let my children down? Yes or no? Yes. Have I been a flawed father? Yes. Do I wish I would have done things different? Yes. Go to a court of law. Will they sentence me to jail? No. Now, if I hurt my children, right, I could go to jail. But most of you didn't. You failed as defining failure as not being perfect. No, change guilt to regret. Change guilt to regret. When you look at this third thing, the more or longer I grieve, the more I prove my love. Glenn said he discovered that he is not the failed, flawed father. He's an imperfect father. But he says, I am a father who did his best. I know I wish I'd have done things different, but I am not the failed, flawed father that caused my son to do this. My son had free choice. He was hurting mentally. But I am Glenn, a child of my King is his identity, who along with my wife have experienced a horrific, horrible tragedy when my son ended his life by suicide. You see the difference? Changing the brain box of who you are. You don't have to stay stuck to prove your love for your loved one. Why would somebody do this? It's a word that starts with G. We've talked about it. Guilt. You're in guilt. That's why you think you can't get better, because it would dishonor your loved one. So you have to prove that you really love them by staying stuck. Now, you don't think that outwardly, but it's in there. Y'all got this? All right. So now we get to section 3, to defeat grief. Can you take a 7-minute break? Yes. 7 minutes till 11:15. And we're going to combine session 3 or 4 and finish right on time. All right? Everybody take a break. We're going to have another drawing for the book. Yay, yay, yay.